The Skywalker bloodline is the single most powerful Force family in the history of Star Wars, and the actions of the Skywalkers have quite literally steered the course of galactic history for generations now. Most members of the Skywalker family have gone on to be some of the most powerful Force users in the galaxy, be it for the light side and the Jedi Order, or the Sith and the Dark. But one member in particular seems to be a bit of an outlier when speaking on the Skywalkers. Despite it being common knowledge that Princess Leia Organa was incredibly powerful in the Force, she elected to take a more political approach to solving problems, and she never fully embraced the truest extent of her potential as a Force wielder. Not to mention a Force wielder with some of the greatest potential in all of Star Wars. But what may this have looked like if this had happened? How powerful could Leia have become, and what kind of Jedi might she have grown into if she were to continue her Jedi training? Well, today, Acolytes of the Galaxy, let's dive into exactly what type of Jedi we believe Leia would have become if she had embraced her full potential, and had opted to take on a life of a Jedi Master. For this video, we will be breaking down both the likeliest Force abilities that she would have gravitated towards, as well as her preferred style of lightsaber combat, and which form Leia would have ultimately chosen. So without further ado, let us begin. We know that Leia's aggression would play a key role in her unique identity as a Jedi, and her upbringing ensures that she would be a much different Jedi than that of her predecessors of Anakin. Most Jedi of the Republic had their emotions suppressed from childhood, but Leia was able to grow into a defiant and aggressive negotiator under the guidance of Bail Organa, the man who she considered to be her true father. And this seems to indicate that she might have been able to more seamlessly incorporate her natural personality into her true identity as a Jedi. So since we know that she was an incredibly sensitive Force user, which powers would have suited Leia best? It's reasonable to conclude that since they are twins, she and her brother have a similar level of inherent Force potential, and seeing as Luke was able to learn with minimal formal training or guidance, it stands to reason that either Leia could have as well, or could have learned from Luke. Luke has been shown to have precognitive abilities, as well as a rarer Force ability known as Force Rush, which allows him to enhance his own physical state in a combat scenario, allowing Luke to perform faster and with more strength than he is otherwise capable of commonly. While we know Leia would likely lead with negotiation, her augmented physical strength in combat would likely tie into her natural aggression, as seemingly Leia is actually more aggressive than Luke is. While Leia is an aggressive negotiator and fierce politician with her share of combat experience, she seems to lead with negotiation and diplomacy above violence whenever possible. Though she certainly is not afraid of a fight, she has been much better suited to building political systems and moving larger pieces of government into her favor. Very similar to another Jedi. This is very similar to the behavior we witness with Obi-Wan Kenobi, as Kenobi is an avid user of the Force and mind tricks, as well as for this very reason. The ability of influencing one's mind seems to be an appropriate ability for Leia to practice, as she would be able to steer peace talks and negotiation into her favor. Given her inherent potential, it's likely that she would have become even more gifted with this power than even Obi-Wan Kenobi, and she would be able to influence the inhabitants of the galaxy to do her bidding, as she constructs an entirely new system of government after the collapse of the Empire, as essentially a political Jedi. This might also lead into her tapping into her darker tendencies and allowing herself to be much more aggressive than Obi-Wan ever was. But under the age of the new Jedi Order, this might be much safer than it otherwise would have been under the Republic. During the era leading up into the Clone Wars, the Jedi younglings were taught to stifle their emotions from an incredibly young age, often just 3 years old or younger, which made the dark side dangerous because they didn't understand how to manage their emotions properly. Luke, however, taught his initiates how to understand their emotions and process them in a much more healthy way, which allowed them to explore the Force more deeply than their previous generation of the Jedi were, as the Jedi of the previous generation somewhat held themselves back. This allowed Luke's students to understand all aspects of the Force, and it was much safer for them to explore different Force-related abilities that would have been too dangerous for the older Jedi Knights. Therefore, it's theoretically possible that given Leia's maturity and her organic upbringing, that she could manage darker abilities without being corrupted by the dark side. This means that she might have been a very good fit for an ability known as Force Corruption, which was largely viewed as the dark side equivalent to the Jedi mind trick. While Leia would likely never never used the full ability as used by the Sith, she wouldn't use it maliciously. Seeing Leia grow and become one of the most powerful mental manipulators in the history of the Jedi Order, which is actually a very different path than that of Luke Skywalker, would have been highly intriguing to see, and we believe that Leia would have in fact focused on these mental abilities, as we already know thanks to Obi-Wan Kenobi as well as the original Star Wars film. The mental fortitude of Leia is extremely impressive. This would allow Leia to subtly influence political networks from across the galaxy, being far more influential than perhaps even Luke was as a Grand Master of the Jedi Order, being able to reform the New Republic to combating those who would oppose their Republic style of governing systems. We have to remember that just like Anakin Skywalker and Luke, Leia holds that very same potential in the Force, making her essentially the most naturally gifted Force wielder that has ever existed in Star Wars lore. This is something that's very commonly overshadowed by the likes of Luke, her twin brother. But make no mistake, although Leia conducts herself very differently from the likes of Anakin and Luke, she is still very much as naturally powerful as the two of them are. We believe that Leia would have been a much different Force wielder and a much different type of Jedi, but still equally as influential, if not more so. Concluding this, if Leia must resort to lightsaber combat, then there are a few things that we can deduce about her lightsaber style of choice. First, we know that Leia has been shown to wield a blue blade during the flashback sequence in The Rise of Skywalker, which is significant for a few reasons, as the blue coloration tells us a few things about Leia. Primarily, it means that Leia has a leaning towards being a Jedi Guardian rather than a Jedi Consular, meaning that she much prefers to be on the front lines of a conflict and is unafraid of physical confrontation. Both her brother and her father before her were avid users of Combat Form 5, known as Djem-So, and at first glance, this seems to fit Leia rather nicely. However, we believe that there is something deeper going on here. Djem-So was an aggressive form that had much more streamlined approach than something like a Taru, which emphasizes acrobatics and speed over strength and power. Strength and power being what Djem-So focuses on. Unlike Anakin and Luke, however, Leia is much less hesitant to get her hands dirty and jump into any given conflict, leading us to believe that Form 5 might be the best fit for Leia as well. Given Leia's understanding of her temper and how to harness it, however, then it seems as if she would be far more adept at using darker abilities, while maintaining more control than the likes of Luke and Anakin that actively did not seek to acknowledge their darker side, with many people pointing to the fact that this is the reason why Anakin ultimately embraced the darkness. But anyway, students of the Force, what do you think of our assessment and some of the Force abilities that we believed a full potential Leia would have focused on? Do you think that Leia had the potential to become far more influential than even Luke and Anakin if she achieved her full potential in the Force? And what lasting impact on the galaxy do you think Leia Organa, Jedi Master, would have left? As always, my friends, thank you guys so much for watching the channel. Hit that subscribe button, and may the Force be with you.